There's a new NSA spying revelation brought to us by Glenn Greenwald and his website, The Intercept. This is, of course, thanks to Edward Snowden's leaks and an extended period of time spent vetting the information to make sure that it's safe to release this information to the public and to make sure that they're not actually getting out information that would harm the nation. So right off the bat, this flies right in the face of the conservative narrative that, oh, well, he just stole all this stuff and they're releasing it randomly and that's very dangerous for the country. No. The Intercept and Glenn Greenwald, they went through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb and they realized what they can release and what they can't release. Well, we now have specifics and we can prove that the government isn't just collecting data on you and me and everybody. There's a broad terrorism warrant that applies to over 300 million people. So, of course, your grandma Betsy, who cooks apple pies all day and watches TV Land, she's apparently engaged in terrorism, at least according to the government. But they're not just collecting our data. We now know for sure that they're going through the information of many Americans. They're actually looking at the stuff. So, let me break this down for you. Theoretically, if the NSA wants to directly spy on an American citizen and go through all their personal data, their emails, their text messages, you name it, they're supposed to get a FISA warrant. Now, what is a FISA warrant? Well, FISA stands for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and that's a secret court. And it's a bullshit court, but at least it provides a minimal form of oversight. Now, to show you just how big of a joke the court really is, though, in its 35-year history, the court has approved 35,434 government requests for surveillance, and they only rejected 12. Sweet Jesus. So basically, what we have here, it's a rubber stamp. It's a rubber stamp. The government gets spy on whoever they want, and they go to the fake court for a warrant. But even with having that rubber stamp available to them, in the case of these 5 Americans, which I'm about to give you the information of, it's, quote, unclear whether the government obtained any legal permission, even from the FISA court, to monitor the Americans on the list. So, in other words, we've already set up this incredibly ridiculous system that allows the government to spy on whoever they want. But it's gotten to the point where they may even be ignoring the easy system anyway and just spying regardless. So, who are the Americans that were closely monitored and spied on with no warrant and zero evidence of wrongdoing? You may be shocked to find out it was 5 Muslims. I'm kidding, of course. That is not shocking at all. And as you're about to find out, they picked the most innocent people humanly possible to spy on. So the first one is a guy named Faisal Gill. He's a longtime Republican Party operative and one-time candidate for public office who held a top-secret security clearance and served in the Department of Homeland Security under George W. Bush. He was in the Navy, and he ran for political office in Virginia as a Republican, and the NSA ended up spying on him. Why? Because he's a Muslim. The next one is Asim Ghafoor. He's a prominent attorney who has represented clients in terrorism-related cases. He already won a court case against the government because they were spying on him illegally. He says, quote, there were over 40 lawyers from every blue-chip law firm in D.C. representing the Saudi government and Saudi princes. But out of all of the lawyers that have represented the Saudi government and Saudi princes, and even in some cases defended terrorists, he was the only one being spied on. Now, why? Because he's a Muslim. Now, look, for this guy right here, going through all the details that the Intercept laid out, you can certainly make a case that, okay, well, he defended terrorists or suspected terrorists, so it's fair to spy on him because maybe in some cases they had a warrant to spy on the person who was an actual suspected terrorist, and that guy was on a phone call with this guy, okay? So this is the one out of all the different examples given by the Intercept that at least there's a debate to be had. But the rest, you can't even make a theoretical case for. So let me continue here. Houshang Arimadi is an Iranian-American professor of international relations at Rutgers University. He describes homosexuality as a non-problem and describes himself as an atheist. He also advocates against Iran getting a nuke, and he works for Iranian-American peace. Yuck! Somebody trying to work for peace in the world. Obviously, this guy is a terrorist, and we need to spy on him and look through all of his emails and his text messages and his phone calls, etc., etc. Now, again, keep in mind, these are people where the government specifically was going through all their information, okay, and there is no evidence whatsoever that they've ever done anything wrong. They are just prominent Muslims in the country, okay? How about Agha Saeed? He's a former political science professor at California State University who champions Muslim civil liberties and Palestinian rights. He's described as a, quote, symbol of moderation and assimilation who urged Arab-American cooperation with law enforcement. He also founded the American Muslim Alliance, which the New York Times described in October 2001 as, quote, the main organization devoted to the political assimilation of the nation's 7 million Arab Americans. And in 2000, this guy's group endorsed George W. Bush for president. These are all people that they're saying, well, they're suspected terrorists. Look through all their information. They have no privacy rights. There's no such thing as unreasonable search and seizure with them. Look through their shit anyway. Another one, Nihad Awad. He is the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR as it's called. It's the largest Muslim civil rights organization in the country. A few days after 9/11, Awad was one of the American Muslim leaders who participated in a press conference with President Bush at the Islamic Center of Washington, and he called for peace and denounced the attacks. So you know how conservatives always say, oh, well, why haven't any Muslims denounced the attacks? This doesn't make any sense. See, we would be fine with moderate Muslims, but there are no moderate Muslims, so that's why we have to go after them and spy on them. Whoa, that's totally not true. This guy did just that. And in fact, if you guys know anything about CAIR, we've discussed this at length on the show. Every time there's an event that happens either in the country or internationally that involves Muslim terrorism, he immediately denounces it. Okay? So, again, this guy is pure moderation. That's what he represents. Muslim American moderates. And all of the evidence points to that. This isn't just like, you know, an outlier example and, oh, maybe behind the scenes he's doing X, Y, or Z. That's just simply not true. So, why are these innocent Muslims being treated like terrorists? Well, as The Intercept goes on to explain here, the culture at the NSA might have something to do with it. So, they explain, quote, in one 2005 document, intelligence community personnel are instructed how to properly format internal memos to justify FISA surveillance. In the place where the target's real name would go, the memo offers a fake name as a placeholder. Mohammed Raghead. So the culture at the NSA is one of us versus them. There is no such thing as an innocent Muslim. Okay, and if you think, oh, Kyle, come on, you're extrapolating too much here, you're inserting your opinion, that's not necessarily what they say, don't create a straw man, but I saved the worst for last here. Quote, according to FBI training materials, the Bureau taught agents to view Islam itself as a Death Star that must be destroyed if terrorism is to be contained, and to treat mainstream Muslims, their words, not mine, mainstream Muslims as supporters of terrorism. Now, you have to understand something, man. I hate all religion. Islam is no different. I think all religion is inherently irrational and dogmatic, and it could lead to hideous problems, and it makes otherwise sane people think irrationally and do horrible things, okay? And history proves that, right? But that doesn't mean that you're allowed to, as the government, say, well, no Muslim should have any rights and we should spy on all of them, even ones that have proved they're not associated with a radical ideology, simply because we're going to lump them in and we're going to be idiots ourselves. You can't do that. By the same token, that's like me saying, well, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he's just as bad as KKK operatives, and he's just as bad as abortion clinic bombers. But that doesn't make any sense. Martin Luther King Jr. was a liberal Christian who fought for people's rights. and who fought for common sense and rationality and equality. Yeah, he was a Christian. And yes, people in Alabama who are part of the KKK are Christians. People who do abortion clinic bombings are Christians. But they're not the same. One is good, one is bad. But what the government is doing is they're saying, no, we're going to purposely not distinguish between Muslims who are radicalized and Muslims who are just regular Americans living their lives. So the hideous irony of this all is that all the Muslims that are on this list here, they are Muslims who actually believe in America and believe in our founding principles and believe in the Constitution and believe in moderation, but they're being treated like they're the opposite. And they're not even being awarded the rights that they love so dearly and that they cherish and that they fight for. And at the same time this is going on, keep in mind, as we've discussed before at length, there was a Department of Homeland Security study that was released in 2009 that found that 56% of the terrorist attacks in the United States from the early 1990s until that year, 2009, were right-wing terrorist attacks. Okay? So certainly internationally, it's a fact that internationally Islamic terrorism is a bigger problem. That's a fact. Okay? But inside the U.S., domestically, it's a fact that right-wing extremism and terrorism and anti-government violence is the thing we should mostly fear. I mean, in just the past year, how many sovereign citizens terrorist attacks have we covered? I mean, plenty. There was one in Las Vegas that was foiled at the last second. They wanted to kidnap and murder cops. There was one in the Georgia courthouse that just recently happened. There was another one in Las Vegas with the people who laid the "Don't Tread Me" flag over cops after they shot them in the back of the head. I mean, there have been countless right-wing terrorist attacks, and the number of militia groups has exploded from 2008 until today. We've given you those numbers before as well. But here we have the idiots in the government and in the NSA not focusing on that at all. Okay, in fact, resources were diverted from right-wing terrorism to Muslim terrorists, and they're spying on all Muslims while they let the KKK people and the sovereign citizen people and the abortion clinic bombers go right by. Here's the thing about intelligence. It should be intelligent. And the whole purpose of the Constitution is that it's not debatable. I have no problem. You could spy on whoever the fuck you want that you think is a problem as long as you go to an actual court, speak to the independent body, and get a warrant. Okay? I don't care who it is. If it turns out 70% of the people you're spying on have fucking red hair, as long as you went through the proper channel, it is what it is, and that's fine. And you obviously proved that, hey, maybe these people need to be spied on. But they're not doing that. They're not doing that.